One of my greatest treasures in life is my two kids, Russell and Lila. And it might be too cliche to say, but my experience of being a father has opened up dimensions of understanding God and who God is as a father. And we use a lot of language to describe God and to understand who He is and His attributes. Like sometimes we call God our Father or our King or our Lord and Master. Or sometimes we describe the relationship that God is our healer or our shepherd, or that we are the branch that gets grafted in. But all this language is helping us understand and describe little pieces of the whole of who God is. And being a father has been something that's connected me to God in that way, in a unique way. Because Russell was born, and when Russell was born, it was like a little light bulb went off inside of me of unconditional love. This little person that I just met that has done nothing for me and who is just here, not adding anything to my love, but he already has an unlimited amount of love from me. And also just connecting to his unconditional love, the favor that I had for him as a little baby, that, you know, when he would spill his grape juice on the couch, you know, certainly some emotions would rise up within me that were not great, but there'd be an undercurrent of my favor for him, that I just loved him and valued him far more than a stain on a couch. And also just thinking about him when he was born, there's just like this power that came with him that swept me up in a desire, just wanting the best for him. So in all these ways I've experienced with Russell helped me understand more of what Jesus would say in His scriptures. When He was teaching, that He'd say, hey, you human fathers, you know how to give good gifts to your kids. You know, if your kid asks you for a fish, you're not going to give them a snake that's going to jump up and bite them. So if you as a human father know how to give good gifts, how much more will God give you good gifts when you ask? So those are some examples from Russell, but Lila added a whole new dimension because Lila came to us through adoption. And, you know, of course I've read the scriptures and seen Paul writing about adoption to people, but adopting Lila brought that to new life in my life again. So when Paul's talking about Roman adoption and his experience of adoption, something everybody was familiar with at the time, he was talking about something that was completely different than our adoption, or my adopting Lila. Because adoption in the Roman system was about placing someone as a son for an inheritance. And kids back then didn't have the same kind of value that they perhaps do today. So for a father, when a child was born, this baby would be placed at the father's feet. And if the father would pick up that child, that would be accepting the child into the family. And if the father looked at the child and there was something that displeased him, he would just walk away, thereby rejecting that child. And then that child would be taken to the agora, the marketplace, and perhaps someone would come along and pick up that child to raise that child as a slave. So Roman adoption, the practice of Roman adoption that Paul is drawing from, is totally different because it's not about these orphan children. It's actually about adult males who could carry on the estate. So in a family in Rome, there was this law for wealthy families that the Felicitia lex, that they had to give a certain amount of their inheritance to each child. So for these families, their goal was to have as few of children as possible so they wouldn't disrupt the family estate. So the social standing in Rome was dependent entirely on the amount of income and the size of the estate. So if you imagine you have 4 children and you have to divide that whole estate up into 4 parts, each of those children would then have less of the estate and not enough estate to be in social standing where they'd have the opportunity to be in political office and do all these things. So this was a risk for Roman families to have children. And the way they solved that quandary was to have no children of their own and to use adoption instead. So they would place someone as a son for their inheritance, to take on the whole estate, to keep the estate intact. And Roman adoption was more legally binding than biological birth. Super fascinating, but an adopted son could not be unadopted, while a biological son could be rejected. And so this adopted son was placed as a son in the family, given the family name, given the inheritance of the whole estate, given responsibility to carry on that name and to honor it. And so this is the adoption that Paul is drawing on when he's using that image to describe God adopting us. And here we are, looking at this adoption, and the people then, Paul's readers, would just be drawn into this grand idea of being adopted by God, being given a place as a son in the family. But immediately, they would also be totally shocked because God was not adopting who they would expect. God was adopting everyone, opening up this possibility for every person to be adopted into the family of God. And each person who's adopted receives the full benefit of being God's heir, of being given a name, their name being written in the book of life, of being given an inheritance in heaven, and be given this responsibility to carry on and honor God's name. And so, as I come to this idea of adoption and just get swept up in the power of it, I'm just amazed by what God does in adopting people. That this opportunity for us to be brought into the family, to be given a name, an inheritance, to be given such a status that God does, not because of anything we've done or anything we've benefited from in life that we earn or give God, but instead it's just this thing that God gives us out of His abundance of love. And then He changes our status to be part of His family. And then He just lavishes on us that unconditional love, that favor, that desiring the best for us in life. And that is pretty powerful.